Hi, everyone. I am Del Hungerford with Healing Frequencies Music. And today is another fun video that answers questions that I get quite frequently. A little bit of technical stuff, but I'll try to explain it in a way that isn't totally crazy. One of the biggest questions I get asked a lot is about tuning, concert pitch, temperament, and all of that weird, geeky music stuff. In reality, tuning is a very personal thing. And what one person feels is out of tune is in tune for someone else. And it changed a lot throughout history. There's a ethnomusicologist who is at the British Museum, whose name is Richard Dumbrell. He has done a lot of research into some of the early instruments around the Sumerian time. So we're talking about 2000 years, well, I guess they call it BCE. So in listening to what he has discovered, because they have cuneiform tablets that actually show how to tune harps. They found ancient bone flutes that some say are 200,000 years old. And they've been able to replicate those flutes. And if you play them, they sound very similar to our modern instruments. And you think, well, how is that? Well, everything is based on harmonics, musical harmonics. And I talk about that in my Frequencies of Creation series, of which I will put a link to the Cliff Notes version of that, of the Frequencies of Creation in this or below this video, so that you have a chance to at least read my process of explaining how all of that works, because the harmonic series is a natural occurrence in nature. And anyone who knows anything about the harmonic series, different partials are what they call out of tune, but they're also comparing that to equal temperament. And equal temperament is basically taking the octave like C to C and dividing it into 12 equal parts. There's been a ton of temperaments and different tunings, which is like A432, A415, A420. And I think the highest one that they've been able to figure out is A450 something or other. So, I mean, it's all over the spectrum as far as where tuning is. Those aren't the things that really make that much of a difference. When we are playing a musical instrument, and, you know, as a professional classical musician, I performed both with piano in recitals and also with orchestras and bands. And whether you're playing with a band or you're playing with an orchestra or playing with a piano, tuning is going to be very different because instruments respond to temperature and humidity in a variety of different manners. And I'm going to pull out a handy dandy clarinet. I'm not going to play it because in actuality, you really need a second person so that you can actually hear it. But I can show you, you know, that this is an old plastic clarinet I'm going to make a lamp out of. You know, I've made a few clarinet lamps in my life. But to show you, you know, when you look at this instrument, you're blowing through it, the placement of the tone holes, which are all of these, and there's tone holes below all these keys. Those are all going to determine what the pitch, whether it's high or low, and they're placed on this instrument to play an equal temperament. But honestly, the only instruments that actually use equal temperament are fretted instruments like guitars and pianos and most keyboards, unless you have a more expensive keyboard that will allow you to change temperament, you're pretty much stuck with equal temperament. But I don't even like to say the word stuck. That means you're just limited to equal temperament. Really, all equal temperament does is it makes it so that you can play all 12 keys, well, 24 because you got major and minor, and then all the different modes and all of those things. And you can go into foreign keys like the key of C and the key of F sharp really are not closely related. So you can't necessarily jump between those keys easily unless you're using equal temperament. So what's happening is when you are tuning, let's say when I'm playing with a piano, this note on the clarinet where I'm using the register key here and the A key is a B flat. That is considered the throat tone on the clarinet, which is a horrible note. It doesn't play well. Well, on it, when I'm playing with the piano, I will never play just those. I will add my second and my third and sometimes all of my right hand to make that pitch sound good. Now, if I'm playing with a band, because everybody else in the ensemble is going to be playing sharp, because as they play sharp, I'm going to probably lift a couple fingers to bring the pitch up. So I can shade, I can barely cover a key, or I can cover a key here, or sometimes I can take one of these lower keys and you're going to know, you'll see that as I gently press it down, it covers the hole. But as it goes down, it also can lower the pitch. So there's a variety of things that different instruments can do. String players will simply move their finger slightly. Brass players will often do it with the voicing, and the voicing is what they're doing inside the mouth. I can also adjust pitch by voicing on the clarinet. Flute players will roll in and out. Saxophone players will do similar to what clarinet players do because we have the same coupler, and the coupler is the mouthpiece because it has a reed and a mouthpiece on it. So the way that we finger and we change pitches can all be changed. So even though this instrument is made to play an equal temperament, I never play an equal temperament because it all depends on what everyone around me is doing. Now, if I'm playing with the piano, I have to play in tune with the piano. And if we ever land on the same pitch, like especially if I'm in the high register, like playing a high B flat, which is thumb register 1, 2, and then this side key or this one, these two fingerings are slightly different in pitch. And I might use one, if I know that I'm going to be sharp by the time I get to that high B flat, then I'm going to do something with fingerings, or sometimes I might even add a finger down here or add a key down here to bring the pitch down. Because the piano is a fixed pitch instrument. And so you as a soloist must tune to the piano. But if you're in an orchestra, all of the instruments are going to go sharp, but strings are slightly different and they can adjust much easier than wind players can because they can just simply move their fingers. But string players tend to always play sharp anyway. So you're doing all these crazy things just to try to keep the pitch up. Now, band, it's going to be different. Band feels to me like it's a little bit more stable because all of the wind instruments, you're blowing into the wind instrument, you're all getting that warm air going through it, and it's going to affect the pitch. So there's a couple of ways that you do it. You do it through voicing, which is changing the tongue position inside your mouth. And then the other is through fingerings. Now, brass players, except for trombones, they can just adjust the slide a little bit, but all the other wind players are going to have some other option that they can use to adjust the pitch, which immediately pulls them out of equal temperament and into just intonation. And just intonation is where you are adjusting the pitch so that it matches what everyone around you is playing. If you're an orchestral musician and you know that you have the same melody as the flute, the principal flute, and let's say I'm the principal clarinet and the principal flute who sits right in front of me are playing the same melody and I'm at a lower octave, the flute has to tune to the lower octave. So we have to listen to each other, and he or she will roll in and out and do different fingering combinations and pull the instrument out. Clarinet players will pull out at the barrel to adjust, or use a shorter barrel to adjust the length of the instrument. If you make it longer, it's going to be lower in pitch. If you make it shorter, it's going to be higher in pitch. So this is just to tell you that you're never going to stay in equal temperament. Now, the other thing to add to this is when you are in an ensemble, let's say I am playing a G, which is above the staff, which is thumb register. This, we call it the register key, not the octave key, because the clarinet overblows at the 12th, not an octave. I won't get into that. But if I'm playing this G and I'm holding that G for a super long time, and that G is the main note of the chord. So we're playing a G chord. Well, actually, since clarinet's a transposing instrument, it would be an F chord. And all of a sudden, the chord changes to an E major. No, it changes to an E flat chord. Then that same G becomes the third degree of the scale. I'm instantaneously going to have to do something with the voicing or something with the fingering to bring the pitch down, because major thirds on the piano are always sharp. And there are sacrifices that we have with equal temperament, but it's the same no matter what temperament you use. There are sacrifices you have to make to bring things in tune. And things are done depending on the key, depending on the chord, where you are in the chord. It's like I said, I could be playing that G and it is the main chord. Then the next thing I know is as I go, the orchestra starts playing an E flat chord. Well, an E flat chord for me, but a D flat for piano. And all of a sudden that same note the note hasn't changed, but the chord has changed, and I have to lower the pitch, which I will add a finger or I will voice it down. Sometimes you can do it with changing your lips, but clarinet players don't do that. Other instruments do. And so that's what brings that particular note in tune. So the whole gist of this, I've given you some nitty-gritty details on how it works, but at the same time, we get really stuck in these absolutes that, okay, you're in equal temperament and you're going to stay in equal temperament. And I can tell you, having played in a bunch of orchestras and bands and as a soloist for many years, it's all going to be determined on who you're playing with, what the tendencies of those instruments are, what the weather is like outside, and what the humidity is like. Oh, and if you're a clarinet player or saxophone or oboe or bassoon, what are the reeds doing? Because reeds, the things that you put on the mouthpiece, they get affected by the weather and humidity as well. So there are many factors that go into the sound that we produce on our instrument that will affect tuning. And the more proficient someone gets on their instrument, the more they're going to understand the specific nuances of that instrument. I was a clarinet professor, so I understand the nuances of this instrument. Now, not this particular one, because this is a student model plastic piece of junk that needs to become a lamp. But my professional model instrument, I know that every time I play certain notes, I have to use funky fingerings to get it to work. And I also know these particular notes tend to be sharp. So when I'm playing with a flute, I'm going to have to do blah, blah, blah to make it in tune. But if I'm playing with a trumpet, the same note, I might have to do something different. And this all happens in the course of just being a musician and playing in ensembles. They always say that playing in ensembles is one of the most difficult things to do because you have to listen. The terminology we use in the classical world is you have to listen across the ensemble. You have to hear what everyone else is doing. You have to know how to tune your notes, where you are in the chord, when your part is important, when your part is not important. And tuning is constantly shifting around because the chords change. The melody changes and the underlying chords that are the harmony basically is constantly shifting. So as a musician that's playing a wind instrument or a string instrument, you're going to have to listen and know how and when to shift. So the nutshell version is wind instruments, string instruments, brass instruments never stay in equal temperament. If they did, they would always be playing out of tune. And you can hear these wonderful orchestras and these wonderful bands that play in tune. Well, how do they do it? They know how to voice. They know how to change fingerings. They know how to do all of these things as they listen to bring a chord in tune. The moment you make an adjustment, you have just left equal temperament land and entered just intonation land, because our ear naturally wants to justly tune so that the fourths and the fifths and the thirds, that all the different intervals are in tune, especially the thirds, the fourths, and the fifths, and the octaves. Those are the most important ones that are really obvious, that stick out there like a sore thumb. And if they're notes that are being held, notes that are quick and passing, those aren't as big of a deal. But it's where you have a conglomeration of people and sounds coming together that you really have to listen and tune everything. So I encourage everyone to not get stuck with, oh, equal temperament is bad. Oh, 440 is bad. Honestly, by the time I get done playing my instrument, I mean, my 528 Creative DNA album, I'm playing the clarinet on it. By the time I get done, I am playing at about 445. A equals 445. I had put a shorter barrel on, which is this thing. It's a little bit shorter to make it play sharper. And by the end, I was pulling out so that I wasn't playing sharp. And again, you're never going to be stuck in these concert pitches. So we have to get our mind out of thinking that it's like this. And I mean, if you play in 440, it's harmful. It's, all of that is wives' tales. So be encouraged that all frequency is good if you intend that it is good. Now, anything that's out of tune, all you have to do is listen to a 5th or 6th grade band and you know what I'm talking about, or a beginning string orchestra. It's painful sometimes to listen to, but they aren't used to hearing it. So go out there, tune, when you're listening to things, do the best you can to tune. And if you're not a musician, understand that equal temperament, the only instruments that stick to it are pianos and fretted instruments. All the rest of us, we can change. So, and it's the same thing with concert pitch. Up and down, depending on the weather and humidity. It's all added in there. So on that note, I think it's time to go make a lamp out of this thing, you think? All right, we'll see you in the next fun video.